The man who would come to be known as Russia's Mad Monk was born far from the glittering palaces of St. Petersburg, in a tiny Siberian village called Pokrovskoye. Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin entered the world in January of 1869, the son of a peasant family. His father, Yefim, worked as a coachman, ferrying villagers across the Tobol River. His mother, Anna, bore many children, but few survived childhood. Siberia was harsh, the winters unforgiving, and Rasputin's early life was marked by the same poverty and superstition that shaped most Russian peasants of the 19th century. Even as a boy, Rasputin was different. Villagers whispered about his piercing eyes that seemed to see through people. He was mischievous, often in trouble for petty thefts and unruly behavior, but also strangely magnetic. People noticed that animals calmed around him, and some swore he had a strange gift for knowing things he should not know. As he grew, Rasputin married young, to a local peasant woman named Praskovia. They would have several children, though only a few survived infancy. By all accounts, Rasputin was not a faithful husband. He drank heavily, wandered away for long periods, and was drawn increasingly to religion, not the polished orthodoxy of the clergy, but the wild, mystical strain of peasant spirituality that blended prayers with ecstatic rituals. In his late 20s, Rasputin experienced what he later described as a religious awakening. Accounts differ on exactly what triggered it. Some say it followed a pilgrimage to a monastery at Verkhoturye. Others suggest it was after the death of one of his children. Whatever the cause, Rasputin returned a changed man. He abandoned drinking, for a time, and set off on pilgrimages, traveling by foot across Russia. He earned a reputation as a strangest, a wandering holy man, who claimed to heal the sick and predict the future. Wherever he went, people were struck by him. He had no formal training, no education beyond basic peasant literacy, yet crowds gathered. He spoke in simple words, direct and emotional. Unlike priests who preached from distant pulpits, Rasputin touched people, literally and figuratively. He would take their hands, fix them with his unblinking stare, and speak as if God were whispering through him. For many desperate peasants, this was more powerful than any sermon. But with reputation came suspicion. Some clergy denounced him as a fraud, a heretic, even a member of a secret sect known for sexual rites. Stories spread of Rasputin encouraging women to confess sins of the flesh, then leading them into temptation himself. Yet the rumors never stopped his following. By the early 1900s, Rasputin's name was known far beyond Siberia. Word of the wandering holy man who healed and prophesied began to reach the great cities. It was in 1905, at the age of 36, that Rasputin first arrived in St. Petersburg. The capital of the Russian Empire was a world apart from Pokrovskoye, a city of glittering palaces, gas lamps, and the intrigues of nobles and ministers. But beneath the surface, Russia was troubled. The empire had just suffered defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, and revolution simmered in the streets. The royal family, the Romanovs, clung to power but were increasingly isolated and fearful. Rasputin entered this world like a storm. Through connections with sympathetic bishops and aristocratic women drawn to his reputation as a holy man, he was introduced to key figures of the Russian Orthodox Church. His charisma, strange piety, and rumored powers intrigued them. By 1906, Rasputin was introduced to the most powerful family in Russia, Tsar Nicholas II and his German-born wife, Tsarina Alexandra. For the Romanovs, Rasputin arrived at the perfect and most desperate time. Their only son and heir, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, a genetic disease that prevented his blood from clotting. Any minor injury could be fatal. The boy's condition was a closely guarded secret, known only to the family and a small circle of doctors. Nicholas and Alexandra were tormented by their inability to help him, and Alexandra in particular was consumed with guilt and despair. Enter Rasputin. According to palace accounts, during one of Alexei's near-fatal bleeding episodes, Rasputin was summoned. The doctors had failed. The boy's condition worsened. Alexandra, desperate, allowed the peasant holy man from Siberia to try. Rasputin prayed over the child, spoke softly to him, and told the Tsarina that Alexei would recover. Miraculously, the bleeding stopped. Whether it was Rasputin's presence, the power of suggestion, or perhaps his insistence that the doctors stop administering harmful medicines like aspirin, which worsens bleeding. The effect was undeniable. Alexei improved. For Alexandra, this was no coincidence. Rasputin had saved her son. From that moment, Rasputin was no longer just a wandering pilgrim. He was the savior of the heir to the Russian throne. Alexandra believed God had sent him. Nicholas, more cautious, nevertheless accepted him because of his wife's devotion and the undeniable results. Rasputin quickly became a fixture at the royal court. He addressed Nicholas and Alexandra not with the stiff formality of courtiers, but with familiarity, even affection. To them, he was our friend, our holy man. To Rasputin, the palace was now his parish. He blessed them, counseled them, and reassured Alexandra in her darkest hours. His letters to her were filled with a mix of spiritual exhortations and emotional comfort, calling her his little mother and urging her to trust God's will. But outside the royal chambers, whispers grew louder. Nobles, ministers, and church leaders were horrified that a filthy Siberian peasant with no training held such sway over the Tsar and Tsarina. They sneered at his unkempt beard, his rough manners, and the way he seemed to leer at women in court. Rumors spread of his debauchery, drunken orgies, seductions of society women, and heretical teachings. The more the royal family clung to him, the more the elite despised him. Yet Rasputin's power only grew. Whenever Alexei suffered a new episode, Rasputin was summoned. Each time, the boy seemed to improve. Alexandra became utterly dependent on him. She wrote, "Our friend is the only one who brings calm and strength to us." For her, Rasputin was proof that God had not abandoned the Romanovs. The Tsar himself, mild and indecisive, valued Rasputin less for mysticism than for the stability he brought to Alexandra. Nicholas's one true concern was the survival of his dynasty, and as long as his wife believed Alexei was safe, he could rule without her despair overwhelming him. But ministers and politicians began to see Rasputin as a threat to the stability of the empire itself. They feared that the fate of Russia was being guided not by policy or wisdom, but by the whispered prayers of a peasant mystic. In the corridors of power, resentment boiled. By 1911, even the church began investigating Rasputin. Some bishops accused him of heresy, others of corruption. Yet each time, Alexandra shielded him. To attack Rasputin was to attack the Tsarina herself. And the Tsarina's will, when it came to her son, was unshakable. The stage was set. Rasputin, the peasant from Siberia, now walked the gilded halls of the Winter Palace, whispered in the ears of emperors, and carried the fragile life of the heir in his hands. Russia's nobility looked on with growing fury. The mystic's star had risen, and in that rise lay the seeds of his destruction. When the First World War erupted in 1914, Russia hurled millions of men into battle against Germany and Austria-Hungary. The strain on the empire was enormous. Shortages, defeats, and unrest spread across the nation. At the very heart of the crisis, in the glittering but crumbling palaces of St. Petersburg, one figure's shadow loomed larger than ever, Grigori Rasputin. By now, the Tsarina Alexandra relied on him completely. To her, he was not just a healer but a prophet, a man sent by God to guide the throne. Whenever Alexei fell ill, Rasputin was summoned, and, once again, the boy would improve. To Alexandra, this was proof that he was chosen. To others, it was proof that Russia's monarchy had lost its way. The war only deepened Rasputin's influence. In 1915, Tsar Nicholas made the disastrous decision to personally take command of the Russian army. It was a move that left him at the front, far from the capital, and left Alexandra effectively in charge of government affairs. But Alexandra, deeply isolated and mistrustful of the nobility, leaned on Rasputin more than ever. Ministers came and went at Rasputin's word. Alexandra dismissed experienced officials and replaced them with men Rasputin favored, sometimes incompetent or corrupt ones. To the outside world, it appeared that a Siberian peasant was dictating the policies of the empire. The scandals multiplied. In the salons of St. Petersburg, the rumors never stopped. Rasputin had seduced noble women, manipulated the Tsarina, even bewitched her. Some whispered that he was Alexandra's lover, a slander that spread quickly because of her German birth and her unpopularity during the war. Satirical cartoons showed Rasputin with Alexandra and her daughters, mocking the imperial family's devotion to him. Even Rasputin's private life became weaponized. He still wandered the capital's taverns at night, drinking heavily, womanizing, boasting of his closeness to the throne. The more the public heard of his debauchery, the more they despised him. To many Russians, Rasputin was not a holy man, but the symbol of a monarchy rotting from within. By 1916, with the war going badly and unrest spreading, hatred of Rasputin turned into plots. Nobles, politicians, even some within the church agreed. If Russia was to be saved, Rasputin had to die. The leader of the conspiracy was Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the wealthiest men in Russia and married to the Tsar's niece. He was joined by Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a cousin of Nicholas, and several others. Their plan was simple: lure Rasputin to Yusupov's palace, kill him quietly, and rid Russia of his influence. On the night of December 29, 1916, Rasputin was invited to the Yusupov residence. He arrived in good spirits, expecting a night of friendly conversation. Yusupov led him into the basement, where cakes and wine had been laid out. Unknown to Rasputin, they had been laced with cyanide. Rasputin ate the cakes, drank the wine, and nothing happened. Hour after hour, Yusupov watched in disbelief as Rasputin chatted, sang, and showed no signs of poisoning. Finally, in desperation, Yusupov drew a revolver and shot him. Rasputin collapsed. But the legend of Rasputin was only beginning. When Yusupov returned later to check on the body, Rasputin's eyes snapped open. With a sudden surge of strength, he leapt up, clawed at his attackers, and staggered out into the snow-covered courtyard. The conspirators panicked. Another shot was fired, and Rasputin fell again. This time, they beat him, bound him, and carried him to the banks of the Neva River. There, they dumped his body into the icy waters. When Rasputin's corpse was recovered days later, rumors spread that water was found in his lungs. Proof, people said, that he had still been alive when thrown into the river. Whether true or not, the story cemented his legend, the man who could not be killed, even by poison and bullets. The conspirators believed they had saved Russia. Instead, they had sealed the monarchy's fate. Alexandra was devastated, convinced that Rasputin's death had doomed her family. Nicholas, already overwhelmed by the war, now faced growing unrest at home. Only weeks later, revolution swept across Russia. By March 1917, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. The Romanov dynasty, rulers of Russia for over 300 years, was finished. As for Rasputin, his death became a symbol. To his enemies, he was proof of the corruption and weakness of the old regime. To others, he was a martyr, a man of the people destroyed by jealous nobles. To history, he became a legend, the mad monk whose piercing eyes seemed to look beyond death, whose presence haunted the last days of Imperial Russia. Even today, Rasputin remains one of the most infamous figures in Russian history. Was he a fraud who seduced a desperate family, or a mystic with genuine healing power? A saint, a sinner, or simply a man who found himself in the wrong place at the most turbulent time? What is certain is this: when the empire of the Romanovs crumbled, the shadow of Rasputin was there, his life and death forever entwined with the fall of Russia's last Tsar. If you want more of this kind of stories, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.